Alright, I just saw Godzilla Minus One in theaters. This was directed by, I believe, Takashi Yamazaki, I think is the director. And this is the first, just straight up tokusatsu Japanese Godzilla we've gotten in a while, I think. I believe, the last one was Shin Godzilla by Hideaki Anno. We've had, we had that weird anime trilogy after in between, and we had some U.S. Godzilla movies, which they're fine. I'm not super into them, but this is the first just true Toho Japanese Godzilla movie that we've gotten in a while. And I'm not super well versed on kaiju movies in general. I've seen this one, obviously. I've seen Shin Godzilla. I've seen the original Godzilla from 1954. I've seen Mothra. And I think in terms of just traditional kaiju movies, that's really all that I've seen. But fortunately, this movie does not rely on any past kaiju tokusatsu knowledge. You can really just jump right into this one because this is a really interesting movie because it's definitely a remake, or it's in terms of there's a lot. It's basically a new entry point for for people to get into Godzilla, I think. But it's also, there are definitely a lot of elements from it that are either paying homage to the original 1954 movie or are just very extremely reminiscent, just picked right out of that movie. So it's this very interesting remake hybrid while also being a prequel in ways that I don't need to get into details with because it's heavy discussion of whatever. But it's also a prequel in that it takes place this takes place right at the end of World War II and right at the beginning of post-war Japanese reconstruction. So it's a very interesting prequel remake hybrid that I ended up really enjoying. Is just a real fun action kaiju city destroying smash up kind of thing. The effects were surprisingly solid. Not quite at $100 million Hollywood movie level, but they were really solid, really fun. Big old set pieces getting destroyed, big old explosions. The heat ray looked really impressive and destructive. It was, in terms of kaiju smash up, had no complaints about this movie whatsoever. Big fun. I guess my one kind of minor complaint is that they really jump you in with Godzilla in this movie. He just he shows up and it starts. there is no ramp up for the for his introduction, which in a way is also a good way to approach things. Just immediately hit you with this monster kicking the shit out of people. But it was also a little sudden in the beginning. Just a real minor complaint on that side. But otherwise, no complaints about the kaiju stuff, and really not a whole lot of complaints about the human side of this either. This was a very again, people always complain about they focus too much on the human characters and stuff in a story, but it's you only complain about that when you don't like the human characters that are in it, certain American movies. But I really enjoyed the overall cast of the series. This was our lead character, Koichi, is basically someone he was supposed to be a kamikaze pilot, but he bailed, and that's not really a spoiler because that happens right at the beginning of the movie. So it's really interesting to see him see that kind of character and follow him throughout the movie as different forces exert basically like their political ideology of that job onto him. Like, we see people blame him for not doing his duty and leading to the destruction of Japan. We see him get blamed for... We see him, like, ostracized by certain people for being that. It's a really interesting, like, push and pull with that. And the choices that he makes throughout this film and how he deals with that in a very... this is just a straight-up PTSD character in this. And the way that he works through that as the film goes on was really interesting, really got me endeared to this character. Supporting cast was really fun, really solid. Not a whole lot of, like, detail on the rest of the cast, but they're, like, fun enough to support his story and just be generally entertaining to watch as the film goes on. There's also... The dialogue in this feels very anime. This does not feel like a live act... Like a... It's very different from, like, what I've seen from other like, live action movies. Like, even, like, again, to be fair, most of the Japanese live action films I've seen were directed by Hideaki Anno. So I guess that's not a great comparison, but there is something about the dialogue in this film that feels very anime. The specific phrasing, the specific timing of dialogue and timing of shots. If you're into anime, you will definitely you'll definitely get that vibe from this, and it was surprisingly pleasant. I thought it would feel odd. I thought it would feel more out of place when I realized that, but it fit the tone of the film pretty well. Yeah, really no. I will say the back third of this film, it did feel very much like it was like hitting plot points as it was going on. Like you could see, it was really starting to pull out like all of the cliches and all of the lines, all the like standard lines right at the very end. So it started dipping its toes into like corny territory as it went on. But aside from that, yeah, really just a fun film with a bunch of great characters. There's a lot of really, really good drama to set up in this like post World War Japan and people working through that, banding together to help get through that. And it also makes a very easy plot convenience of, the U.S. and the Soviets don't want to be in the same water, so you're on your own, Japan, bye! Which I thought was so funny. And also, the more I learn about post-World War Far East, post-World War Asia, that tracks. That tracks, not gonna lie. So that was really fun. I will say some of the acting was a little off in terms, like, sometimes of a line that was supposed to be super emotional didn't quite have the oomph behind it. And I would say, like, visual acting in general I thought was a little underwhelming. I thought that the way people carry themselves and the way that they move could have been a little more emotive, I guess. Maybe that's just a thing with, I don't know. I was hoping for a little more of that, but otherwise they're not bad acting jobs by any stretch of the imagination. This is just a real fun, straightforward Godzilla movie. It doesn't feel long either, which is great. Everything just feels like it's moving constantly. There's nothing that feels like it's dragging out. There's nothing that feels like it's feels like bloated or anything. Except maybe some slight pacing in the like final battle. I think could have been like, and I'm talking like seconds. Really, this is a nitpick, really. But yeah, other than that, real fun film. Glad I saw it. I'm gonna give this like a decent 7. It's nothing like blew me away about it, but I had a fun time with it. It's just a good old kaiju smash up with some strong characters pulling their way through the film, and like a really solid core about how the Godzilla kind of represents that the war isn't quite over yet for these people. Like for the people who are left to pick up put the rubble back together afterwards, the war isn't quite over, and Godzilla serves as a interesting representation of that, the same way that he was a representation of the dangers of atomic energy in the original film and the horrors that was inflicted upon the Japanese people. So yeah, this is like a decent 7. Feeling good about this one. If they give this guy more Godzilla movies to work with, I would definitely be interested in seeing what happens. I also need to just see more Godzilla movies because I've seen barely any. So yeah, that's it for this review. I think Wednesday is when The Boy and the Heron comes out, so that's finally coming down the pipeline, so I'll see you back then for that. But for now, my name is Ember, and I'll see you next time.